We advise the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
You are what you watch.
Hello, my name is Tambuatco and welcome to our program.
Okay, what do we have for this evening? Well, I know I'm wearing red and it's obvious why I'm doing that. So I guess I'm doing this for you. Tonight's topic is going to be called Romance of Government. It's got nothing to do with Valentine's, absolutely none. And it could be farcical as to why the title or the topic was created. Either way, you will find out and you will be part of this discussion. Normally in this program, I invite different people that come and they become like resource guests. And we stick to specific topics. Tonight, we're going to do something different, which I do once every 6-7 weeks. I ask some of the hosts on GNN to come on and sit with us. You see, the role of a host, alam niyo po, pag ikaw nakaupo, ikaw nag-host ng programa, hindi pwedeng ikaw masyado salita ng salita. Pero alam mo, madalas talagang madaldal lang ako talaga eh. Pero nangyayari, iba yung role talaga ng host. Dapat kung i-question, para kang host ng bahay nyo. When you ask people to come into your house, you have a specific role and responsibility. That's to basically to engage your guests into conversation and to the specific topics you wish to find out. In this program, what we'd like to do is something different. I've engaged the hosts I've asked them to come and be here in the studio because of many current events that seem to be taking place. Now, the more relevant events would be charter change, which is now brewing once again. Of course, the suicide of General Reyes. You've got the issues going on around the world. We've got the revolt in Egypt, the revolution. Now, I was looking for a common title between just those three main topics, but we will not be limited to that. And it came to me, it was quite relevant, Romance of Government. Or what we call maybe mali, ano? It should be maybe Romance of Democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our GNN in-house historian, who is also the editor-in-chief of Congress Magazine, who will be celebrating the 18th year of the most outstanding congressman, which will be staged
19.
this Wednesday at the Manila Hotel. 19th year, I'm corrected, but I'm behind 1 year. We have Dr. Frank Grego. The other guest that we have is also a host, very prolific at that. I'm sure you all know him. He has a very, very powerful program called Heartbeat right here on GNN. You've got Ray Ramon Orosa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on this program.
Thank you, Harry. Glad to be here.
It's always nice to call on you and Dr. Frank when the issues start to get very warm. And now, as we are about to approach summer, maganda-ganda the new issues coming on. Let's tackle them one by one and go through it as precisely as possible. Let's see. Charter change. Ramon, you were part of the 15-man board that was constituted by GMA to put together and make sense out of whether we're going to go through it or not. Your points of views now that it is being put back to center stage through Senator Defensor.
Okay, I think that in view of all of the things that happened, the fact that the Supreme Court struck down people's initiative for having been a flawed attempt. And
Technicality.
That's a whole story. No, there's a whole story there that can be brought out, but obviously this is not yet the time for it. But the issue now that I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that the people will trust will be a constitutional commission.
That's
and
the third option.
The Congress and the Senate need to create or pass a bill that will authorize a constitutional commission to be formed with well-defined duties and timelines. The big problem that comes up is who will control the constitutional commission. And that's why a lot of people in Congress, even in the Senate, prefer a con us. But considering that there are so many unresolved issues regarding what they call, it's not in the Constitution anyway, a constituent assembly, and that is the issue of whether the lower house will vote separately from the upper house or as one body, is going to derail that issue a great deal. But there is always a piecemeal solution, and the Congress, if they can get their act together, can always pass one amendment at a time, which means that you are subjected to a long process. So a lot of it depends on whether your feeling is the total Constitution needs a great deal of overhaul. Now, if you are going to confine yourself to what they're saying, only the economic framework of the Constitution needs to be changed, I don't buy it. I don't see any overwhelming need to change the economic fundamentals of the Constitution, although it can be improved. But in other words, the tipping point has not been reached. The economy is doing reasonably well. We're making a lot of progress, although it is a confused kind of progress, because aside from the economic progress, we're having a lot of political nonsense going on.
Wrong title, The Romance of Democracy, not government. Yes, Frank, what's your point of views on that?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before I touch on what the Honorable Ray Orosa has said, let me go back to the antecedents of our Constitution. Because in so far as I am concerned, I'm not concerned with the views of others. We only had three, take note, had three...
3587.
No. Three constitutions that truly reflected the sentiments, feelings, and aspirations of our people. I refer to the Biak na Bato Constitution, the Kakarong Constitution, and the Malolos Constitution. Ray has mentioned of 1935. Okay. The 1935 Constitution is not, or was not, a true reflection of the sovereign will of the Filipino people.
Pero yun ang ginaya ni Marcos, yun ang ginamit nating Constitution. Yun ang popularly known as ang ginamit.
Teka muna.
Sige, go ahead.
Teka muna,
ininterrupt mo. Sige,
si Ray, hindi mo ininterrupt eh.
Sige. Apologies, keep going.
Itong 1935 Constitution was the implementation of the Tidings-McDuffie Act of 1934. We all know that. The 1934 draft for implementation, supposedly the next year, 1935, was dictated upon by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president at the time. Now, what were the two conditionalities imposed by the U.S.? First, the draft must be submitted first to the United States President for approval. Second, you should put up a government that is patterned from the United States government.
Bicameral.
Meaning, federal. That's the government. But, what happened? Later, it became a unitary presidential, not bicameral. Huh?
Okay.
Why?
We're following.
Why? Because it was very easy for America to control a government under its umbrella of commercial empire if it is a unitary government. So what happened was we had a presidential form of government but unicameral in form. It was easy. Okay. I'm referring to the 1935 Constitution because the implementation of the Jones Law of 1916 that created the bicameral legislature from 1979 to 1934 was of the Jones Law of 1916. Okay. My question now is, was it a faithful reflection of the sovereign prerogative of the Filipino people when it was dictated by the U.S. government? No way.
But Frank, be it or not, it is still one and the same constitution that we've followed based on the changes introduced by Marcos in 1974, when he turned it basically dictatorial.
Okay.
Ang ginamit niyang pattern was the 1935, regardless of whether it being the true sovereign will of the people.
Okay. You are not talking of the 1973 Constitution.
73, oh. Yung
Okay.
ginawa ni Marcos, he
Remember
had to. Dictatorial.
that it was not, again, while the election was free, while the election for the delegates was really free, but the implementation was not free because that constitution was the product of the mind of Marcos.
Correct.
And his
Autocratic. Tama.
his cordon sanitar.
Yes.
Huh? And so, it was not, again, a reflection of the Filipino sentiments.
That's what you're driving at.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Okay, going now to the
He's driving to the
1987.
point of the sovereign will of the people, whether it was really followed or not. Okay, correct.
Yes.
Carry on. Sige.
Now, Ray talk of CONCOM, 1987 Constitutional Commission. Were you a member, Ray?
No.
Oh, okay. Now, whose dictations again? Under what circumstance, under what atmosphere was the CONCOM convened to create the Freedom Constitution of
But
Korea?
that was not an elected commission.
Yes, correct.
No,
It was an appointed.
Correct.
Yes,
kaya
appointed
nga.
yan.
Kaya
You know,
nga.
I
Okay.
think
Kaya
it's
nga, di
important
hindi na
ito.
naman reflection
Oo nga, no? Okay.
of sovereign will. Now,
Revolutionary government, eh.
and it was passed by an orientation of vengeance. Most of
against
the
Marcos,
provisions there, yes.
Because
Because
nagmamadali, kasi it was a one-year government that needed a constitution by 87. Kaya napamadali, there was 52 people that put it together.
kaya nga, it's
haphazardly
the worst constitution
to date.
from 1897 up to today.
Okay.
The
So you
worst.
pointed out the sovereign will of the people quite well. Thank you. That's a nice
Yeah,
way of
but
putting it. Your point of view was very well placed.
I need to raise an issue here when we talk about whether a constitution reflects the people's. Because all of these constitutions were ratified supposedly by the people in one form of plebiscite or another. Now, in terms of trying to build a constitution, you don't pass that around to 45 million voters until after the fact is done. Some hopefully wise people,
Yes.
hopefully perhaps elected as representatives, can then use their minds to craft the Constitution. Now, who is to say whether that Constitution, in fact, reflects the, quote, will of the people? That's a will that really cannot be determined.
Difficult.
But if they ratify the Constitution in an open and fair election,
Democracy
we will
at
have
work.
to assume that it is reflective of the people's will. Although I've never seen a Constitution defeated. No?
I'd like to go back, Ray, to your point of view about the commission and the convention. Okay. The convention wherein there will be elected posts or the representatives, the constitutionalists, so to speak. The other one is through the assembly wherein you have the Congress, basically, the Senate and Congress itself, that will convene it. One of the bigger issues that played up during the time of our president, Ramos, was that there's a seeming distrust among the congressmen and the legislatures because of the obvious oligarchies, the big power players.
It
people have been in
continues.
government. It continues today, so the situation remains the same. So can we say, which is why basically the assembly has basically failed. It has not really prospered simply because there's a lack of trust with those leaders who are now sitting who actually have a mandate. Now, this is based on public perception. So how can we even go towards the assembly? One, sasabihin, kuro-kuro. Kung gaya niya, may mga pamilya sa norte, nandiyan na sila 30 years. Di siyempre, pag magka-assembly na naman sila rin yan, alam mo gagawin nila, habaan nila, term nila. Di ba yun mga nababasa natin, naririnig natin sa radyo, sa telebisyon, sa dyaryo, nababasa sa dyaryo. There is a mistrust, a distrust. So,
Because this...
go ahead.
Because, Harry, these people presume bad faith.
You are referring, when you say these people...
The
you are-
voters, the Filipino
voters,
people.
These
that's
people who are talking on radio, he was referring
you're talking
to...
media. You're talking media.
Yeah.
You're talking. So
Yeah.
you're saying there is a distortion of real public opinion versus what media is promoting.
No, not really. These people, you have a better opinion than the editors and these people on radio. You have even the most acceptable opinion compared to them. But what I'm saying is this. there is a perception that the congressmen or the leaders would try to distort, would extend their term, would...
You don't believe that perception exists?
No, these people are highly patriotic. It does not mean that these people, that because these people are politicians, they are no longer patriotic.
No,
That
but-
is a wrong perception.
No, Frank. The assumption is, well, do we agree, disagree? Do you believe, perception, personal perception, the congressmen, the legislators, because maybe that's where it bugs down, that they're basically honest?
Yes. Remember,
That's why that's why it breaks down. like
remember,
that.
you're talking of honesty, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead. But
We're talking of honesty. The congressmen, okay, I say that the congressmen, the senators are honest. Why? There is no corruption in the legislature. Corruption is in the cabinet. We have a lot of scandals in the cabinet. No one can come out with an accusation that a congressman is corrupt. Up to now.
Yes, and
Oh,
yet,
and let-
I know a lot of congressmen and a lot of legislators and senators. I'm not pointing a finger and accusing finger any single one of them because I have no real data or proof. But when you talk of real perception, I can just talk to the guard, the security guard here in the building, the editors, the copywriters, the cameramen, and immediately I will tell you 80-90%. And a lot of them already have met a lot of these legislators. I'm just talking perception. You've got to remember that many of them, are oligarchs. Look at what happened to Ampatuans in ARMN, di ba? Look at the many
local
big
government
family-
executive, local government election.
Yeah, okay, local yun.
They
Hindi
were not
congressmen.
congressmen.
But even,
Wait, but I think, Harry, the issue here is, I can understand the position of our good friend here when he extols the integrity of the people in Congress. And we are all entitled to our own views. But I think it contradicts the more common perception. And
Yeah,
I know
common
some
perception.
congressmen who have admitted it to me, but I'll never mention their name, that while they all claim they never handle the money of pork, and
They all
come
have
on,
high blood.
it really defies imagination to think
Okay.
that they don't enrich themselves in office. And
It
I
does
say that,
defy
you know, I mean,
imagination.
I say that in all candor. I think there are some very, very good men in Congress. And as a matter of fact, you have about 170 new faces
Yeah,
in the lower part of Congress. And because they are first-timers or first-termers,
May maraming returnees, ah.
maraming returnee, but
Maraming
for the
returnees.
majority is new.
with the same name.
Well, probably a cousin, a son, a wife, a
With the
daughter,
same
or whatever. You know, I'll just point out the question of people's confidence in the legislators is broken because they see that they refuse to act on matters that will affect them. Like, for example, we have a constitutional provision against anti-dynasty, and nobody in
Yeah,
Congress
yeah,
wants
there you go.
to define
There you
You
go.
know why?
what
There
that
you go,
is.
there you go.
You know why?
Sige, go.
Because you will be disenfranchising the political right
So
of
be
their
it.
children and their daughters and sisters and
That's
brothers.
our Constitution.
Remember that. For example, I'm a congressman. Does this mean that my wife, my son, have no more political right to run for public office?
But they should.
That is a denial of his political right.
But it should be, don't you think, Frank?
It's in the Constitution.
It's in the Constitution.
Like it or not,
Oo.
no, Duralex, Sedlex, it's constitutional provision.
Dapat
Ray,
pagbawalan.
Hindi, kasi
But that's why kayo na magde-define sa Kongreso kung paano yan eh.
this is the system where people misinterpret the monarchical dynasty and political dynasty.
Please explain.
There is no prohibition on political dynasty. What is prohibited in the spirit of that provision is monarchical. That is why even if somebody would introduce a bill as what they did in Thailand or this Naradi Surodom Norodom Sihanouk, they passed a
No, that's
law.
Cambodia.
Yeah, Cambodia.
Thailand is Bumibol Adula Day.
The monarchy there is constitutional monarchy passed by the constitution to put up a monarch, a king.
What does our Constitution say? Does it not? Is it not
No
clear?
mention of monarchical,
neither. Political or monarchical.
it just
It
says-
just says dynasty.
No political dynasty, and it is
Since
left to Congress
1987.
to define what those
But they have
terms
not
ought to be.
decided to touch
They
Who
will
does that?
not, because that will be depriving other people, other members of their family to run
Okay,
They
so
also have that right.
so they are free to violate the Constitution
Yes, no.
at will.
That's not a violation of the Constitution. You have the right to run for public office. You ran, I know. Does this mean that when you won, you become a congressman, does your son would be deprived of his right also to run for public office?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Let's change it a little bit.
Okay.
There is a prohibition against a president running for a second term. What's the basis of such a prohibition? Why is he going to be deprived his political right to run for a second term?
Because the term has been extended.
Not
6 years. 6
extended.
years.
Maski
Before
na.
it was 4. So they have to enter
And the congressmen are elected for 9 years, 3 consecutive terms.
Then after that, bawal. Well,
Sa kanila, bawal. So, in other
That is
words,
the foolishness of the freedom constitution of Cory.
now you're anti-constitutional.
Don't you know that the more the congressmen, the more these people, the senators and the governors stay in office for long, they become honed. They become experts in running the affairs of the government, of the country.
Really?
Kaya nga, bitin, yes. Bitin yung 9 years.
ladies and gentlemen, the passions that run high in the studio, don't worry. We are
We're
not
still
enemies.
good friends.
We all love each other. But you see, passions run high when you're trying to emote or trying to promote specific ideas. And that's what should happen in your homes. It should happen to you daily. This is what you call the big debate that should have taken place some 10, 12 years ago. The problem is maybe all of you are sitting back there watching TV and just saying la-di-da. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about you. We're talking about your future. We're talking about the present. And it's the present that will carve away our future. Hindi pwede po nakaupo lang kayo. Here in the studio, the passions do run high. But we don't do it because we get pissed off at each other. We do it because we care. Now, we're going to have to take a short break because that's the way it goes in TV. But we will come right back, and when we do, we'll wrap up the cha-cha because we want to go into the current event, which is called General Reyes, who just passed on. And finally touch on another international phenomenon called Egypt. Stay with us. Hello, my name is Tambuatco, and we're back on the second part of the show. But as we go on, we have Frank Grego with us, Dr. Frank Grego, and we've got Ray Orosa. Our topics basically was about cha-cha, charter change, and I'd like to end it, but Dr. Grego wants to cap it with a short point of view. Frank?
Yeah, there are 2 points that I would like to further elucidate. One is perception. Before the recess, you were talking of perception. You know, some people believe in perception. And more often, perception is wrong. In the first place, perception is not an evidence to hold on to it. You cannot anchor your arguments based on perception. So when these people who are trying to poison the airlanes, pollute the airlanes with their trust perception, they should be disregarded. Another thing, Congressman Orosa.
Hindi po ako congressman. Hindi po ako congressman.
Hindi ka lang sinuwerte, pero you almost made it, di ba? Ano yun?
Perception.
No. Natapos na yun. Na-clarify ko na.
The convention versus the assembly.
The mode of charter change. Yeah. the vehicle that should be used. I understand Ray is in favor of either CONCON or
Assembly.
Assembly.
Constitutional, not the CONAS, but the Constitutional Commission.
The commission,
An
yes.
elected commission, constitutional commission.
Okay, perhaps siguro
Elected commissioner,
will-
Ray, that means convention.
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 And this is by appointment again.
No, not by appointment, by election.
By election.
I wonder why don't we just go to the CONAS,
Again, because
Constituent Assembly?
yun na yung argument natin kanina because of the assembly.
Yes, because this is more economical, more thriftier for the government. And the congressman can just be the constitutional delegates. The CONAS, the Constituent Assembly, has already been proven to be very, very effective. Remember that, yes, do not forget, Ray, the Malolos Constitution. Remember that in the morning, the Malolos congressmen, members of the Malolos Congress, were constitutional delegates. It was yun ang example, best example of Constituent Assembly.
Okay. Allow me to cap it so that we can go into the next subject. Quick commentary lang, very, very quick, short commentary on perception. Media creates perception. Perception need not be true. In fact, it is not truthful. Regardless, but the problem is because it is the majority that supposedly says what they think. It's not what SWS says or Pulse Asia or the other survey companies. It is what media says it to be true. And the people as a whole just look at it and say, duh, okay, that's the truth. The problem is it is perceived to be truth. The second issue on whether CONAS, and the Commission, the three different ways, because we have the what we call the last one, the People's Initiative. Obviously, it has not made it through. It has not engaged enough. Hindi pwede. In other words, talagang it looks like the only other way that is left is got to be the convention, meaning the voting. Parang ganun lang, without a mandate. Again, because of perception. But let's go to the next topic because we're going to see this unfold. And ladies and gentlemen, not for anything else, but it's true, the great debate must go on, whether we do it now or within the next 5 years of President Aquino or not. The debate must continue because there are a lot of loopholes and problems with the specific constitution. And already you are seeing them at play as they engage each other, just between the powers of the House, between the congressmen and the Senate. And there are many other issues. And the lawyers are the best constitutionalists when it comes to this. They're making a lot of money and we're getting more confused. So either way, even the economic provisions, ang dami po eh. So either way, the debate must begin and we must all begin to talk about it. Gentlemen, let's go into the current event about General Reyes. I wrote a copy, I wrote an article on Opinion magazine, I just released it today, but it'll be published on Monday next week. That's issue number 26 or 27. My title was, let me start this out. Hero or plunderer? General Reyes, what do you think?
General Reyes.
No, not him. I mean, ask for
What
General
do I
Reyes.
think of General? You know, I knew General Reyes. He was a patient of my uncle who's a dentist, and we've come across very, very socially on a number of occasions. And he seemed like a very pleasant and a very, very intelligent person. And to that extent, since my knowledge of him is superficial,
It's easier than to critique.
it's easier. Well, maybe it's easier to critique. But what we have to do is to try, perhaps, to look at it from the standpoint of saying, okay, if all of the statements that were being made had some degree of substance, but I would have to go back one step back and talk about it in terms of methods of governance. To me, Secretary Reyes was a victim of a method of governance. And somehow the question that has to be raised and made perhaps a more important issue is, when you are running a country, how do you maintain yourself in the position? And we know very well that GMA went through an awful lot of demonization. And so the question is, or maybe the truth of the statement is uneasy is the head that wears the crown. Diba?
Maybe it's just PR, wrong media,
or whatever.
wrong handlers, but everything else he seems to have done properly, except perception has worked against it.
But whatever you say, whoever caused the demonization is not the issue. But the issue that comes up is some of the thoughts that have always been expressed is that the dealings were substantially all transactional in character. Okay? So
Agreed.
if there is some truth to that, in the same way that when Marcos was sitting on the throne, he made the generals rich. He made a number of other executives
Yes.
rich. He made a number of other relatives
Yes.
rich. You know, parang happy ba lahat? So I'm not saying that Secretary Reyes asked for anything.
Victim of circumstance.
But the question is not whether he. But the question is not whether he asked,
Hero or plunderer?
but whether he received. Now, no. The issue here, kasi Harry, is you cannot separate those two as totally two poles that are so far apart. We are all human and we all make mistakes. And sometimes when somebody gives you a gift, you don't know that there is a motive behind it.
5 million? 50 million? 150
Whether
million?
Well, that's still
Aside
speculative
from the 5 million
until
Yeah, monthly.
monthly.
Kasama
Ayan.
na yun eh.
And all the trips for which Mrs.
Kasama
Reyes
yung
was
mga
supposedly
Mrs. Reyes,
given.
kasama
and all
ni
that.
Mrs. Carlos.
But that is
Garcia,
a
yeah.
practice that has been in the AFP long before Angie Reyes got in there.
So
Now,
okay.
So if that is the case, you know, and the AFP has always resisted any kind of inquiry into its activities. And they try to cloak it with national security considerations. Now, does that excuse how he was treated in the Senate? No, that's another story. The self-righteousness of some people in the Senate in terms of how they accused him, to me, did not belong and totally dishonored the Senate. Now, you know, they may say I am well motivated, but as they say, the road to perdition is often paved with good intention.
There you go. Frank.
Well, I would say that while I did not like the uncoutness, kabastusan.
Go ahead.
Di ba nang sa
I
Tagalog?
would say it uncouth.
Angkut or angkout?
Either way.
Uncouthness.
Angkutness.
Yeah.
Okay. Kabastusan. While I do not like that, but this has been a practice since time immemorial.
Puro bastos ang nandun sa Senado. Ba yung sinasabi mo?
Go ahead. Continue.
This happened.
August halls of Congress. Oh, sige.
This happened in the Athenian Assembly. Remember that Solon, one of the best, almost he was like a Villaperte of our today's Congress, no? He was, the way I could picture him, he was a Villaperte. A very aggressive interpellator, a very persuasive debater. But he was, for a while, ostracized because of his, again, uncouthness. Huh? But
Uncouth.
uncouth.
Uncouth. Go ahead.
But remember that sarcasm is associated with intellectualism.
The lowest form. It is known to be the lowest form of intellectualism. Sarcasm.
Because the intellectuals, whenever they get answers that are evasive to the question,
Yun ang repartee.
yes, nagagalit sila. They become sarcastic.
Your point being
But again,
that there's nothing wrong
That's
with the way the
excusable. That's what you're saying.
And it could have been done in another way.
Okay.
But then, that should not be removed, that power to cross-examine, even to bamboozle without really insulting the members of the resource.
Was Reyes a hero?
Alam mo, patay na yung tao eh. Ayaw ko na sana mag-comment, but not a hero.
I would like to give
When
my
it
point
comes
of view.
to integrity.
I'd like to give my point of view. You know, only a week ago, before his untimely suicide, the public perception, again, media, and people you talk around to, sasabihin ng lahat, galing na Senado, trabaho sila ng trabaho. Ang galing ni Jinggoy. Narinig ko pa nga si Teddy Boy Luxing in that morning show, Karambola, and was saying, ang husay talaga ni Jinggoy. And here comes Trillanes out of prison for out of so many years. Kabangga niya ngayon, the very guy who actually he had to fight against over so many years. Diba? That's why he stayed in prison. Ang galing nila, tinatrabaho nila, nahuli nila yung military, nahuli nila yung corruption. Di ba parang ganun eh. Nalabas. Remember, it was Jinggoy brought out this guy Rabusa out of nowhere. And then, the woman came out, the auditor came out, Mendoza, Heidi. Ba, ang galing ng Senado. Nagtinginan ngayon kasi popular naman, everybody knows this guy Carlos Garcia is a crook and he's getting away with it. And he just got away with it. He got out of prison. He's made to, based again on public perception, 130 million, over 300 million. The abuse of power, the abuse of money. So, democracy is at play and everyone's clapping, everyone's cheering. Namatay bigla ito si Reyes because nag-suicide. Either way, I even heard his lawyer saying that this guy is a hero because he shot his gun, or fired his gun into his heart, not to his head, because it was his heart that was hurting. Come on. Alam mo,
drama na lang yun.
But is Senator Lacson guilty or not? He's been gone for a year and a half. Di ba?
But in the case of Senator Lacson, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a question of whether he's guilty or not, but he's being a fugitive of justice and refusing to submit himself to the rule of law in this country. And as a sitting senator that does that ought to be expelled from the chamber motu proprio.
But looking at General Reyes, that's also his responsibility to answer these questions. Now, who was it who told me? Congressman Jun Alcover and his people, sabi nila, alam mo yung pagpatay ni Reyes, ang daming sumara ang gripo niyan. Marami sana matuturo niya, marami sana mababasa. Sumara ang gripo yung namatay bigla. So there's finger pointing. How many people are going to be involved? Does it go all the way to the past president? Does it go to all the generals? Does it go to this practice that's been very corrupt? Has this been going on for 30 years? So is he a hero for stopping that? Now it's the Senate which is being pilloried. Bumaliktad. How flimsy the Filipino people. How quick to turn around and say, grabe naman si Trillanes, grabe naman si Jinggoy. But just before that, just a week before that, siya ang tinitira si mga general.
Pero Harry, public opinion has always been fickle.
Exactly my point.
Why are you expecting something different?
I realize that Filipino has lost all morality and all values to the present time because it shows. It just shows in this issue. I didn't even realize, I was dumbfounded when I found out that the church accepts suicides. I was in a forum about 6 months ago, in Ateneo no less, and I walked into a room, it's called the Bobby Ongpin room, and I was taken aback. Sabi ko, Jesuit to, di ba, Catholic? I know, kasi Atenean ako eh. Bakit siya may kwarto dito? Di ba suicide yan? Bawal sa simbahan yan ah. Yung pala in 1983, my parish priest explained last night that Pope John II decided na pwede. So pwede na pala maging Katoliko in suicide. So ngayon, lahat ng Katoliko pwede na mag-suicide. Ganun lang naman yan eh. Simple lang yan eh. So if you can't handle the pressure, the kitchen's too hot, shoot yourself. We will still pray for you and take you to heaven. Now, the other point is how fickle the media is, or the people. Una-una, tinitira natin ang galing na senador. Nagpakamatay isa kasi hindi niya kaya. Ano nangyari? Ngayon siya ang hero. Now, come on, there are questions that beg to be answered. 5 million, 50 million, 150 million, so many trips abroad, tapos magpakamatay ka, come on, obvious ba? And then in radio, everyone's the other way around. Parang, we've got a hero. Do we have a hero? Do we have a plunderer? Of course, those that know him. My heart goes out in condolences to the family of General Reyes, without question. But here in this specific case, let's make a spade. May issue ba siya? Obviously, there's smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire. He was asked there because there are anomalies that need to be questioned. Somebody pointed, plunderer ka, sagutin mo kung tama o hindi. Hindi siya makasalita. Di ba? Correct me if I'm wrong. And then now we're gonna put him sa libingan ng bayani. Should we not question it first? Was Marcos a hero or not? If you look at Marcos in the many years that he was the dictator, it's not all 100% bad. But we refuse to put him libingan ng bayani. And yet we asked Reyes to be buried in there because he shot himself to get away from what? Pressures? This guy's a general, my gosh. This guy's a man with a lot of discipline. It shows in the way he walks, the way he talks. This guy's a respectable person. Maybe he got out of it because too many people will get hit. Either way, it's the easy way out. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Bravo. But the thing is, I could have said much harsher than what you're saying now, were it not that he's already dead. But anyway, remember that in the history of the cabinet, he is the second man to commit suicide.
Second, sino first?
Si Roberto Ongpin.
Si Ongpin nga pala. Cabinet ba siya? Finance,
yes.
no?
Oh, yeah. Did you ask
No, Roberto Ongpin did not commit suicide.
No, I
Please,
mean-
it's Jimmy Ongpin.
Jimmy pala.
It was just during the time of Cory.
Cory.
Jimmy, I'm
Yes,
I'm
yes.
talking Jimmy.
Jimmy
Ongpin. That's the room in Ateneo, not
Oh,
Bobby.
I know.
Bobby's alive.
Still alive.
Yeah, he's a very respectable businessman.
Jimmy was in the cabinet of Cory.
Yes.
Remember? Now,
Wait,
we
hold
could
on,
have.
guys. You have to rush it up. We only have 3 minutes. I've been
Was
told.
there somebody who asked him or who asked, like what we're asking now, as to what was the reason why he committed suicide?
Dead man no tale no tale.
There-
Wala
there's a
malaman
there is a big difference because Jimmy was never accused of taking anything.
That's true.
I knew Jimmy,
Yes,
and I
never
know his
accused.
brother.
That's so
he
true,
was
isn't it?
never accused of
There was
taking
no point.
anything.
And there was no pressure
His
then.
integrity was never in question.
Ray, remember, do you recall the Benguet issue? Oh. Yun dapat in-expand mo. Sige.
No, it's not a question of his personal integrity. Nagkaroon ng problema sa Benguet, and I am familiar with that, and I am familiar with the personalities. Some personalities did wrong by Benguet, and they were able to
Yeah.
get away with it, but it was not with the awareness of Jimmy. Now, as a corporate executive,
He should have
It's
explained
command
that to the
responsibility.
people before
Maybe
committing
Bankero ka
suicide.
noon eh. You were,
oh yeah,
you
that's
were in
right.
the
So,
bank.
but still, when he was already there in government, the reasons why he did himself in had little to do with Benguet. Although he
gentlemen-
felt very badly, I know about what happened to Benguet after he joined the government.
Gentlemen, we're already at the end of the show, and I'd like to give you another minute just to wrap up, to give a short message to our viewers based on 2 topics very quickly. Let's start with Ramon Ray Orosa.
Well, ang aking punto lang dito po sa lahat ng nakikinig sa programa ni Harry is to stress the importance na siyasatin natin ang mga nangyayari. Huwag tayong mabilis magpapadala sa ating damdamin sapagkat mayroong interes ang ating bayan na kailangan nating arugain at pangalagaan. And that is above the interest of any one individual in this country, wherever that person is. And that includes the president. You know, and this is where sa aking tingin, kailangan talasan natin at ang ating pananaw at pag-iisip when we consider many of the things that are happening in this nation. Although I concede sa dami, kuminsan talagang nakakalito, no? So, wag naman tayo magpanic. Ha? Makakalabas at makakalusot din tayo dito at meron pang magandang kinabukasan sa awa ng Diyos.
We have Dr. Frank Grego.
Lahat ito may mga historical precedents. For example, the angkotness, kung angkotness man, ng Senado. This also happened in the Roman Senate. If they could not tear down to pieces a guest in the committee investigation, they would assassinate as what they did to Julius Caesar. Bigyan lagi natin lahat ng historical precedents ang mga bagay na ito without condoning the angkotness of the senators and the congressmen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, enough said on the 2 issues, constitutional change, cha-cha, and or the suicide of General Angelo Reyes. We are sorry, I apologize, we could not take up the issues of Egypt. My only comment on Egypt now would be, can you imagine a government where there is no longer a constitution? It's called the abolishing the constitution. Imagine a government that is on standstill and the military takes over. The ability to identify the word military, the role it plays, and the role it plays when it comes to actually governance. I know it's part of the implementation of what we call the law. I guess there we have the romance of democracy. Exactly what we've been talking about, perfect for the celebration of this day. Red is perfect and fitting because it's almost sad. It's very sad because so many issues are real conflict issues, and we have to be able to identify what is right, what is wrong. The morality, our values, well, let me see, is there a garbage can around here? It's gone somewhere. And that's because we don't seem to care. Or we are just as fickle as all the TV shows that keep coming out. And we just agree with everybody in anything. Alam niyo po, we have to stand to what is right and what is correct, not because it's to your advantage. What is right, what is correct is embedded in the teachings of your faith, be it Muslim or Catholic or Christian or whatever. Alam nyo, you have to go back to that, and once you lose that, all sense of propriety, civility is gone. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Maraming salamat po. My name is Tambuatco. We'll be back next week, the same time, 8 o'clock. right here on GNN. Thank you very much, Ray. Doctor. You are what you want.